Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Let's gather around the campfire and share some scary stories /x/.
I've got a tale about this place if anyone is interested. Visiting Savannah, Georgia in the middle of October, exhausted because I had trouble sleeping the night before, kept thinking someone was standing at the end of my bed, going on the very last ghost tour of the night. This place is the last stop. 432 Abercorn. Immediately get a sinking feeling when I look at it. Guide starts telling us the backstory. Goes a little something like this. Alcoholic military man lives there with his eldest son and young daughter and some servants. Mother died during childbirth. Father takes it out on daughter by beating her. Little girl gets caught playing with kids across the street. Father drags her home, beats her incessantly, then ties her to a chair in the library and leaves her locked in there. This is August in Georgia. The library has west-facing windows. Temp in the room rises so high she dies of heat stroke and dehydration. Her skin turns green because apparently that can happen if bruises don't develop fully before someone dies. Dunno if the story is 100% true, but something definitely isn't right about the house. Place feels ultra ominous. Guide starts talking about the house physically affecting people. People pass out, feel dizzy and sick, throw up, have vivid nightmares. Tour used to stop on the porch of the house, but so many people started fainting on the property that they do the tour from across the street. People claim to see either the little girl or the shadowy figure of an imposing man. Guide says that women and people who are depressed or psychically open are most vulnerable. Against my better judgment, I go across the street with my friends to get a closer look. Stomach churning, head spinning, body is generally noping the hell out. The place feels so threatening, like it was watching and waiting, almost predatory. Snap a few pictures, then scurry back across the street. Still can't shake the terrible feeling even hours later. Remember on the drive home that I couldn't sleep the night before, because I thought someone was standing by my bed. Remember thinking that it felt like a little girl. Doublenope.jpg. Ride back to my friend's house, shaking and pale and deeply disturbed all the way. Try to sleep that night. Seems like every nightmare I've ever had gets replayed at hyperspeed. Long night of nothing but sheer terror. Friends said I was screaming and shouting in my sleep. Wake up multiple times throughout the night. At some point in the early morning, I wake up and feel something in the room with me. Large, imposing shadow moves in the corner. Recall Guide saying that others had experiences with the presence in the house following them back to their homes and hotels. Oh shit.jpg. Try to force myself back to sleep, kind of successful. Wake up again, and it's closer. Just standing. Bury myself in covers and sleep again. Wake up once more, it's at the foot of the bed. Convince myself that I have to be dreaming. Miraculously go back to sleep. Wake up again because I can't breathe. It's above me. It's leaning over the bed. No way this is a dream. What do .jpg I can't move? Oh shit, I cannot move. Feels like something is holding me down. Can't breathe. Is this sleep paralysis? Pure fear racks all my senses. Get the sense that this thing wants to hurt me and it's hurt people before. No way this is just sleep paralysis. Think, if I saw a little girl last night, was that the same girl? Is this the father? It's perfectly silent and still, but it's definitely not part of the regular darkness. Light is utterly devoured by this thing. It will not move. Spend what could have been minutes or hours trying to be as still as possible. I know it knows I'm awake. I'm fucking petrified. More scared than I've ever been in my life, and I'm pretty used to spooks. Adrenaline is pumping, makes me feel dizzy. Body overloads and I pass out. Wake up the next morning. Friend asks what happened to my arms. Look down at my upper arms and chest. Bruises shaped like large fingers. Bruises on my chest. Like something was holding it down and making it difficult to breathe. Nope the fuck out. Left Savannah the next day. Never saw it again.
Excuse the lack of Greentext. Mobile sucks. Be me. Be 12 or 13. Staying with my cousin who is the same age. Decide to go explore the woods. Follow the trail until it stopped. Switch to traveling down a deer trail. After a while, the trees start to clear. Come upon an old cabin. Nothing special. Run down with a single chair and small table in the center. Turn to leave and feel a sudden surge of heat. Turn around and cabin's on fire. Start hunting for stuff to put out fire. I grab handfuls of dirt. Cousin uses bottles of water we brought. Before we can get to the cabin, fire and cabin vanish. All that's left is black spot where cabin was. Run back to my cousin's house. In light, we notice our face and arms are really red from heat. Feels like sunburn. Wash hands and face and just go to bed.
This happened to my stepbrother, and it was first told to me at a campfire. Converting it to Greentext because I can't be bothered to write narrative prose. Week-long youth leadership training, stepbrother was a counselor. Part of the training is that every kid spends a night alone in the woods in a shelter they built. Kids are sent out in pairs to set locations. Counselors secretly check on them in the middle of the night. Stepbrother is in charge of a boy and a girl. Nightfall, he checks on the boy. Boy is just chilling around his fire, looking spooked, but whatever. Stepbrother goes to check in on the girl. She isn't in her set location. He starts looking around for signs that she was there. Finds the ashes of her cooking fire and scattered shelter. Her pants, a golf club. Oh shit! Stepbrother begins calling her name. No response. Little chance of finding her in the woods at night. During the search, walks by an abandoned hunting cabin. Cabin is always padlocked to keep out dumb kids. Shines light in the upper window of the cabin. The light hangs in the window when he moves his flashlight. Spooked, stepbrother goes back to the boy. Boy doesn't know where she is, so they start looking together. They return to the abandoned cabin, decide to check it out. The padlock is broken. Bad feeling .pdf. Stepbrother opens the door to the cabin. Girl is in there, perfectly fine, and didn't want to sleep in dumb shelter. It turns out the girl brought the golf club for protection, and the pants as a spare pair. Probably not an exact, or as spooky, retelling, but that's as well as I can remember it.
Be me, working the mid-shift, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., in the building control room. One other guy, my buddy, is on shift with me, just there to keep the building open, provide security, and also just in case an emergency happens. Usually, I just play games all night. It's an easy shift. A quick bit of context, the building was outfitted with motion sensor lights and night vision motion sensor cameras. Whenever the cameras sense motion, a little stick figure man running appears in the bottom corner of the camera. One night, a motion sensor light on the opposite side of the building turns on. Think nothing of it. It happens all the time. Usually mice, bugs. Running man appears on camera, still thinking nothing of it. Running man icon disappears from the farthest camera and appears on the next camera. Start paying attention to cameras, there is no visible movement. Running man icon slowly continues coming down the hallway toward our control room. Both me and my buddy focused on cameras, trying to spot any kind of movement. I see nothing. Running man icon makes it all the way to the camera pointed directly at the spot in front of our door. Neither of us see any movement. Both of us kind of freaked out. Running man icon stays on the camera outside our door for maybe 45 seconds before turning off. Nothing else crazy happened that night, but I'd heard other people's ghost stories from that building, so it was pretty creepy to finally have my own.
My mother told me a story about something weird that happened to me when I was younger. Be around 4 or 5 years old. Live in an old house, had a wood stove and everything. Playing upstairs in the second story, got my Hot Wheels and action figures and stuff. Mother was downstairs, had the day off. It's about lunchtime and I come downstairs asking for 2 bowls of soup. Why do you need 2 bowls of soup, Anon? I think my friend is hungry too. I never had an imaginary friend and didn't go through that phase. Your friend? Who's here? His name is William. Okay, well, I will make you both food. Okay, thanks. She keeps talking to me, asking what he looks like. Describe his very old-sounding clothes, cufflinks, button-up vest, his slick dark hair, pale skin, weird pants that weren't jeans, etc. My mother was really tense about this for some reason, decided she would take the food upstairs with me and watch me play. Oh, forgot to mention this was our antique room. I grab the bowls, put one down in front of a bunch of those Hot Wheels, then sit across from it about 3 feet away. I'm eating and looking across from me, laughing. Mom has no clue what I'm laughing about. I push a car across the floor to the other clump of Hot Wheels. It crashes into them and moves a bunch of them around. Here's where my mom freaks out. None of the cars are moving. I clumped mine up and moved back a bit. One of the cars 4 feet away from me zooms into my clump of cars. Mom just freaks the shit out, picks me up, and takes me downstairs. While closing the door, she actually sees the little kid for a split second. So when I was about 4 years old, I apparently had a ghost buddy.
Be me. Be 11 years old. Family moved to a new town a couple months prior. Far enough from my neighbors that while I can see their yard, but never their faces. I've never even seen their faces, just heard them yelling on occasion, kids roughhousing loudly, etc., not in the middle of nowhere. But it's still a relatively small community with a lot of farmland, and we're not too far from a fairly wooded area. Parents think nothing of this until we learn that the community has a coyote problem. Everyone apparently just deals with it. Attacks are really uncommon, but every kid that walked to the bus stop in the morning had a can of pepper spray in the event that they might cross one. I only ever saw them around the woods, and only once at the edge of my yard, so I'm not all that bothered. Wake up to howling one night. I usually fall asleep with the TV on, so I assume that's the source, until my tired brain processes that the light of the screen isn't filling my room. It was so loud, they must have been on my driveway. That's when I hear a new sound. It's distinct from the howls, way too high-pitched to be a coyote. It's gotta be 2 in the morning, and again, I'm 11, so this scares the hell out of me. Fall back asleep eventually. Assume it was a dream until I come home from school that day, and my mom tells me about hearing it as well, and the fact that she found a small carcass a stone's throw from the porch. Turns out the neighbors adopted a sheep pretty recently, and despite knowing full well of the wildlife situation, thought it was a good idea to let it stay on their screened-in porch at night. Chewed a hole in the screen and got out, only for the coyotes to get him. Really screwed with me something fierce as a kid.
Be me, hiking one day in some dense woods in Alabama. More like just wandering around bored. It's quiet, like eerily quiet. See some dead birds, rabbits, half-eaten bodies of stuff, more than I felt should be normal. I start noticing marks on trees. It's in the shape of a K, definitely not natural. Shrug it off as people who came through before me, like some Boy Scouts or something. While I'm walking, I stop and hear a noise. Leaves are rustling and twigs snapping. Something's walking around me. Being kinda jittery 'cause I'm in a woods, I start feeling nervous. As I'm standing still, I notice the sounds get louder till they stop, seemingly right on top of me. Out of nowhere, a figure walks out from behind this tree. I nearly shit my pants, quickly back up in a startled motion, and stare at it. It's just some dude. He had on jogging pants and a t-shirt with tennis shoes. I couldn't hardly tell what color they were. They were so dirty. His hair was matted, and he had a week or so beard going. You scared the shit out of me, man. I know I should have taken off, but I wasn't thinking straight. I was so freaked out. He just stares at me for a sec, then says, "Do you know me?" I look at him, thinking I should, that he's implying I know him from somewhere. Don't recognize him and say, "Sorry, man. Have we met somewhere before?" I'm terrible with faces. He gives me another stare and tells me to leave. Oh shit, I thought. He's probably the landowner or something. "Yeah, I'm leaving now. No problem," I told him. He turns and walks away. Later, I get back to my car and drive home. Don't really think much about it. Then one day, about a week later, While I'm watching the local news, I see a story. Apparently, a man had escaped from the Patrick Institute for the Criminally Insane, located very close to the woods I was wandering around. When they show his pic, I feel my spine stiffen with fear. It felt like the temperature just dropped 20 degrees. I got so chilled. I swear it was the same fucking guy.
I guess I can share one. Be me, pretty young, maybe 10 or 11. Be in a woods near Eatonville, Washington, up near Ohop Lake. Family is having a bonfire, so naturally us kids decide the best thing to do at night is go along the game trail and adventure. We get pretty far from civilization. All we have are these toy guns we brought with us to play war. Some of them have working flashlights. Decide to play a game of manhunt. I run off and find a place to hide. Waiting and waiting, suddenly hear footsteps. They're heavy. Oh shit, .mp4. Suddenly realize I'm a child on my own in the woods with a plastic toy gun to defend myself with. Shit, .wav. Can hear it snuffling and wandering nearby. Get brave enough to jump up, scream as loud as I can whilst pulling the trigger on the toy gun. It was one of the loud spark toy things. Run as fast as I can. Eventually meet up with the hunters in the clearing. Utterly terrified as I tell them there's a cougar back in the woods. Suddenly hear this god-awful wailing sound like a woman being tortured or something. We regroup and GTFO back to the campsite. Never go out alone again. Looking back, it was definitely just some random fox we heard or something, but holy shit, was it utterly terrifying to hear.
This is the story of when I went bushcrafting as a teen and saw some weird shit. Pic related to what the camp looked like. No roof. Be me. Be 15, living out near the woods. Whenever I got home from school, I did my homework, ate, then went to the woods straight after. When I would go out there, I always felt a rush of calm and safety hit me. Decided that one night I would go out and camp there. Take a hatchet, a knife, and a canteen with a filter tip. At around 9 p.m., my camp is complete. I've built a wooden superfort from the trees, survivalistgod.jpg. Now I decided that it was about time to go ahead and hit the hay, as it did get really dark. This patch of woods is about 1 mile or 2 from my house. I was on track, so going there was easy, yet far. Wake up to the sound of rustling bushes at about 3 a.m. Grab my knife and go to defend my base camp from whatever is outside. Can't see shit. Forgot to grab my flashlight. Light the fire again and look around as best as I can in this light. See a bush next to me. Move. Decide to gain some balls and kick the bush. I immediately regret this decision. A white hand grabs my ankle, digging its nails through my pants and into my leg. Scream and try to cut the fucker's hand off. The thing screeches like a banshee with a stoma. I go running after, kicking the fire out. Full-out sprint from the camp all the way back home. Lock the doors and hide under my blanket, holding my knife. I decided to go back the next morning to gather my supplies that I left behind. My camp was practically destroyed. I decided to never go back into those woods for as long as I lived there.
Been waiting to tell this. 5 years ago, 15, nice suburban town in Arizona. Go on nightly jogs and walks through my neighborhood because it's too hot during the day. Nearing the end of my walk, walking on the sidewalk. To set the scene, bushes on one side with gaps in between them, and pine trees on the other. Suddenly, my instincts kicked in. Get the sinking feeling something is hiding in between the pine trees. Look to the right a split second later. Something is standing there. What the fuck are you thing jumps at me around the fuck. Sort of thin. Looks bald and hairless. GTFO of there back to my house. I have no idea if it chased me, but it definitely didn't follow me too long if it did once I started running under streetlights. I don't think it could have been a person. It was dark. But there were lights nearby, so I would have made out features. It was like a silhouette. The way it was standing in the trees makes me think it was waiting for me. It might have been a shadow person, but I think they only show up in houses.
Creepy shit my grandpa went through. My mother told me this when I was growing up. Figured I should pass it on. I've got stories of my own, but that's for another time. Be my grandpa. Vietnamese refugee, mid-20s. Bounced around the South China Sea with my infant mother for a while before ending up in California in the mid-70s. Gets put in a dingy old apartment in Oakland with a lot of other Viet refugees. Every weekend with the boys he'd gather in one of their apartments. Smoke, drink, eat food, all that shit. He'd bring my mom with him so she could eat. She was around 3 when this happened. They'd always end up leaving really late, after midnight most times. Have to walk down a dim, poorly lit hallway. Pick relevant, kinda what it looked like according to her. One night, Grandpa keeps looking over his shoulder while he's carrying her back to the room. Every time he looks over his shoulder, he speeds up. Eventually breaks into a sprint, has to descend like 3 floors to get to their unit. Slams the door behind him. Something bumping against the apartment door. Great-grandma comes out and starts yelling at him. "What the hell were you thinking? You've brought it here." Grandpa tells Mom years after the fact what he saw. He saw a woman at the end of the hall wearing a white ao dai, pronounced ao yai, a traditional Vietnamese dress. She had long black hair. She was also 7 feet tall with disproportionately long arms, and she was floating a couple inches off the ground towards him. My knowledge of Vietnamese superstitions is pretty limited. What is it he could have seen? Is there a name for such a spirit? Has anyone else had an experience like this? In any case, I've told this one around the campfire more than once. Gets people really freaked out.
Spooky. He was probably a little mad. Hallways can make me uncomfortable since there is a single far-off destination and no way out, other than the entrance. This begs the question, what if something that moves quicker than me uses the entrance that I did? I think it's easy to, for lack of a better term, lose your mind in a setting like this. Maybe he was very sensitive to whatever drugs he was using.
He wasn't using any drugs, just drinking and smoking cigs. The fact that he's intoxicated in this story raises some doubt, but my great-grandmother corroborated the story until the day she died. So I don't know. Your point about the hallway, though, is pretty valid. They freak me the fuck out, too.
That is a white lady. They have been reported globally and are part of the folklore of many, many cultures. It is a type of spirit, always dressed in white, often has long hair. Folklore varies by region, but some things are always consistent. She is searching for something, or is angry, vengeful about a wrongful death or murder.
I work nights at a prison. Always hope to see some of the weird shit reported by others, never do. Sitting in tower, probably around 3 a.m. The building across from my tower is about 4 stories tall. A shadow appears on the building, about 1 story tall. Shadow starts to walk from one end of the building to the other. Shadow disappears. It was humanoid. I could see the legs taking steps. The shadow was cast on the outside of the building. The lights used to light up the outside of the building were large stadium-like lights, but they are positioned on the walls opposite the building, under the overhang of the roof. I never got to experience the really creepy shit, though. I tried, but nothing. Oldest prison in the state. Some of the buildings date back to the early 1800s. One tower I worked stood directly over where the gallows used to stand, and you could supposedly hear it dropping sometimes. I worked that tower twice a week for a few years and never heard anything. Still can't explain that fucking shadow, though.
Let's see. I was kind of born into a cult, spent time in a stone chamber, some call it coffins, in a room with 8 corners, and after 24 hours, or depending, I would rise and go to the basin of blood and wash, mainly my face. Spooky enough? Frankly, it's boring. Sounds weird and creepy overall. It's a tedious, boring, useless way. Also, it was animal blood, not human. LOL. Well, it's a room with 8 corners. It has stone statues, big, and I mean very big coffin-like chambers that are set on the floor with marvelous carved statues on top. The priest has very large beads symbolizing crossing over the worlds when you go through, wonderful bells and patterns, copper basin under a small window, which is during that ritual filled with blood. It's an initiation. Any woman or girl can go, but during initiation, which starts depending on which season it falls, either dusk to dawn or dawn to dawn, depends on age also, stay in the coffin, rise, and then to the basin. The female high priestess is the only one permitted in the room with the person that is in the coffin. It's very quiet, and I was let out few times to sit up and just rest. It's long, but as soon as you go back in, It's like you never left it. Time fades. Just thoughts. It's for the first female born, goes mother to daughter only line. But people go in the other chambers, just not that one. Often some from family can just go inside the property, regular room, and mostly look from outside.
Hanging out with two friends in town, Josh and Chris. Shooting the shit, talking about life. Josh and I mentioned the cemetery on the outskirts of town and how eerie it is at night. Chris hasn't seen it before and decides we should all go. Me and Josh are hesitant for a minute, but decide to join him. It's 1 a.m. as we're trekking across town. Pretty small town, maybe about 1,000 people out in the middle of nowhere. Start getting closer and closer to the cemetery. As we get within maybe 500 meters, we hear music off in the distance. Chris makes a joke and says it sounds like Good Morning Middle East. We laugh and think nothing of it. For some context real quick. The town is a retirement town, so people typically live out the rest of their lives here. The cemetery is huge, with a pretty vast forest behind it. As we get closer, the music gets louder and louder. Hear chanting and drums being beat off in the distance, just from behind the tree line at the cemetery. We're all creeped out at this point. I lead Chris near the entrance to show him the crypt, at least before we go. Josh, for some autistic reason, decides to shine his phone light at the crypt door so Chris can get a better look. Inadvertently also shines the light towards the tree line. Music immediately stops. We freak out and run back the way we came through town. Finally got to my car and we decided to fuck off and drive away. For a good 20 minutes, a black sedan is following us on these borderline abandoned back roads. Eventually lose whoever it was, thankfully. Never actually figured out what happened that night. Always sort of uneasy since I don't live too far from the cemetery still. Me 12, small Slav boy. On a trip to my cousins that live in the mountains. My cousin is 1 year younger. Wander around the woods with his grandfather. He tells us a lot of folk legends about this place. One time we stumbled upon a wooden stake nailed to the ground in a random place. Anons don't take that stake from ground. It brings bad luck. Sure, okay. We didn't see this stake the next day in the same spot. I've been visiting this part of my family regularly every summer. Cousin's grandfather died in spring when I was 19. Unfortunately, he didn't get to see his grandchild reach 18 and drink with him legally. Cousin's dad was strict about that part. In July, after a family birthday party, we decided to get hammered with friends, and that went weird. 8 kids drinking cheap vodka and beer in a wood since 4 p.m. Be 10 p.m., still bright because summer. The party is slowly dying. Eventually, we decided to put out the bonfire and head home. Others went first with trash bags. Me and my cousin made sure the fire was properly extinguished. We slowly get moving and spot something. Stake in the ground. Grandpa told us it was used by some warlocks to transform into a werewolf. One had to jump over the stake chanting a spell. He didn't know the spell, of course, but saw someone doing that. I start jumping, singing abracadabra. Nothing happens as expected. Laugh and catch up to the group. My cousin's house is a bit behind town, so we walked others home and then went alone. Circa 11 p.m. the lights are shut down. Economy. Suddenly I'm feeling like someone is watching us. Haha bro, you're a wuss when you're drunk. The feeling escalates to the point I want to run. We then both hear something like dog steps on a road. We turn around and see nothing. Probably just a wind.mp3. We continue walking and after a while we hear it again. This time closer. There is a gigantic dog on the road. It's not a dog, it's a wolf. He looks at us just standing there. We are like 150 meters from our house, no way we could run. The wolf then simply leaves. Run home. The next day we talked about this and we both saw it. Dunno if just drunk or seen an actual werewolf.
Story from my uncle. First time doing a Greentext, and I can't really remember the whole story, so sorry if the story sounds dumb. Be my uncle 4, 5 years ago-ish. Live in Distrito Federal, Mexico City. Be in the kitchen that has a window looking outside into the yard. Smaller shack-like buildings on the property, like a small guest room. Some kid around the age of 3 to 5 with pale skin and blonde hair appears from the shack. No mummies way.jpg. My uncle just watches because what the hell? Kid sits down and starts playing. Kid looks at uncle and gives him a warm smile. Uncle blinks or whatever, and the kid isn't there anymore. My uncle died a bit after that, and like 2 years later my nephew was born, and he happened to have pale skin and blonde hair. It became red as he got older, but whatever. I also remember hearing from my dad that my uncle said that he didn't actually get any bad vibes from the kid or anything either. It might not be all that spooky, but I like to think it's an interesting story.
He just saw the form his next life would take. Sometimes we reincarnate into the same family. Pretty sure my dad came back as my son. We actually had a convo about this before he died. And now that I think about it, I may have been his dad before too. A lot of issues to work out, LOL. My grandfather, possibly me, was an alcoholic and a compulsive gambler. My dad was his youngest kid. My grandfather died in a fire, seriously, before I was born. My dad swore he would never subject his kids to the shit childhood he had, and he was a man of his word. He was obtuse and stubborn, and often we clashed, but there was absolutely no doubt that he loved me and my siblings, and we never starved or froze like he did as a kid. A number of years before he died, I asked if when he finally did die, he could come back as my son. I had my boy last year. Was he my dad before? I don't know for certain. But I'm going to be the best father I can to him, regardless.
This is a story my father told me that his father, my grandfather, told him. Be my grandfather. Be somewhere between the 1880s and 1900s. Have dad who is Confederate veteran. Walking with Confederate vet dad late at night. Walk by the field. See pale figure rise up in the dark. Freak out. Tell dad we need to GTFO. Why? Tell dad I just saw a ghost in the field. Oh, did you now? Tell dad, yeah, we gotta get out of here. No, I don't think so. Come on, let's go see what it is. Freak out even more. Dad now dragging me to the edge of the field. Dad hoists me over the fence. Dad climbs the fence. Oh my God. See pale figure rise up again. Dad decides to challenge supernatural forces. Trapped in this field with it. Tell dad I saw it again. Uh-huh, I'm sure. Was it over that way? Say yeah, and we need to run now. Let's go investigate. Plead with dad, but get dragged along anyway. Getting closer to where I saw the ghost. This is madness. Hear a low sound on the ground in front of us. Sounds like flesh being torn. Suddenly before us, white figure rises up again, even less distinct up close. It's something pale set against something dark. Low sound of flesh being chewed. Even in darkness can now see the head of a cow, not flesh being eaten. It's grass. Lazy cow face stares uncaring at us. There's your ghost, son. Cow lowers its head to graze. White patch of vaguely human shape lowers and disappears. Cow raises its head to chew. White patch of vaguely human shape appears and rises. And that's how my great-grandfather taught my grandfather not to be afraid of the unknown.
Be with a group of friends in the inner city. Grew up in the ghetto, so abandoned, unsecured, condemned buildings are common. Hear urban legends about the local asylum. Decided it'd be a good idea to go there at 3 a.m. We go in and fuck about, toss holy water we bought around. One of my friends throws a Ouija board against a wall mocking devils and shit. Walk into a hallway. It's empty. Go into one of the patient rooms. We keep fucking around. Walk out. Random ass chair sitting in the hallway facing us with one of the still undamaged lights on. We shit our collective frilly panties and GTFO. It was totally just some junkie getting those darned pesky kids out of his crack den, but it was horrifying to us.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more Greentext will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.